before starting, let us just glance through the early life of Mahavira, because a bit of the knowledge about the life of Mahavira just for few minutes will help us. Mahavira was born in 599 BC at Kundagram in Vaishali, that is Bihar, modern Bihar. Time of Buddha birth was almost the same. Buddha was also born in the 5th century BC, and Mahavira was also born the same time. Maybe the few years Buddha might be junior or maybe less in age, but both of them were contemporaries, and both of them were trying to get enlightenment, to seek the ultimate truth, and both of them attained nirvana in their own way. Mahavira was ever growing, having very sharp intellect, fearless, introvert with a very few words. These were the early childhood symptoms of Mahavir. Because he was ever growing, he was different from other children. Therefore, his name Vardhaman. Vardhaman is ever growing. So we are also calling. There is another name of Mahavira, that is Vardhaman. Then he was having very sharp intellect. Many people will come to him to seek advice, even when he was at the age of 9 or 10. Therefore, few people gave him the name of Sanmati. Sanmati means having a very sharp knowledge. Then fearless. It is said in the Jain scriptures that because devas, gods, know in advance that this man is going to be Tirthankar, the god or the enlightened master. Like it is also about Buddha. Whenever Buddha took birth, gods came. The same way the Mahavira, when he was born, gods were watching everything, because everything is decided that this man is going to be Tirthankara or Pathfinder or an enlightened soul in this birth. So they tested him by sending some snake, and he was totally fearless. So for that also, his fearlessness was shown to the entire masses, that he was not at all afraid of that snake. Introvert with a very few words, he was not speaking, he was keeping silence when he was in childhood, and he was just in the dhyan only. This is what is said, that he used to speak very few words. So all these many miraculous events are narrated in Jain scriptures that will take 1 or 2 sessions that we may do later on. Some differing views about his marriage. See, there are two sects or two schools of thought in Jain tradition, but one is Digambar, another is Shwetambar. Digambar sect believes that he renounced the world without marrying. He declined to marry and his parents agreed. And they also said that his parents died, or they took some vows, and then they left their body before Mahavir took renunciation. But the Swetambar sect says that he married to Yashoda, and he also had a daughter. Mahavira renounced at the age of 30 in 569 BC. Being a prince, he left in a royal palki from his, because he was born in a kingly estate, and then he left in a royal way from his home. And then when the territory of Kundagram was over, then he sent all of the persons, all of the attendants, all the people who came along with him. He just sent them back. Then there was a rock. He sat down there. He removed all his garments. He removed all ornaments, even say all his clothes and belongings. He renounced everything. He renounced world completely. They say that Digambar tradition say that even he left all his clothes, and he became total Digambar from that time onwards. And then for about 12 years, he moved from place to place in forests and tribal areas. That is the modern West Bengal areas. That was the most ferocious types used to live there, and they will hit Mahavir. They will send stones on him, because they were think that who is this fellow who is just wandering, and he was not talking. Anybody was asking any question, but he kept silent, and he will remain only in contemplation and meditation. He will just when the Chaturmas, there are the 4 months of rainy season, which is now also presently prevailing at that time also, he will just stand in one particular mudra that is called Kayosarg mudra, standing mudra. There is a way of Kayosarg meditation that I'll deal tomorrow, and we can take around 10 minutes of Kayosarg meditation also. That's also very good with the Anapanasati. So that we will try tomorrow. So then he continue at one stretch for 4 months, 5 months, he will be standing in Kayosarg mudra. He will not take any kind of food, and he will just stand, and he will be in deep contemplation, seeking to find out who is he, to attain the ultimate knowledge. Then he attained Keval Gyan, all knowing intuitive vision. Keval Gyan is all knowing, ultimate intuitive vision, because the ultimate knowledge cannot be expressed in words. It can only be experienced through intuitive faculty. Therefore, it is called Keval Gyan, all knowing intuitive vision. And then when he was having this, when he got Keval Gyan, the Jain scriptures say that he was sitting in Go Dohan Mudra. Like you milk the cow, you sit, and then you milk the cow. So at that time when he attained Keval Gyan, he was sitting in that posture that is called Go Dohan Mudra, where you just sit like just on your feet, and then you milk the cow, and even your feet are not fully placed at the ground. Then after thus for 12 years of penance and meditation and observing silence, he attained Keval Gyan, that is all intuitive knowledge, all intuitive vision about the truth, ultimate knowledge. Now the gods, it happened in the life of Buddha also. When Buddha attained Nirvana, he got awakened. Then gods waited for Buddha to preach or to give his message. The same way gods wished him to reveal the knowledge. Gods waited for Mahavira to reveal his knowledge, and 65 or 66 days passed, and Mahavir would not speak. And everybody, God became very tense. Then Kuber made a large venue that is called Samavsaran. There is a great assembly where you will find, if you go to some Jain temples, that Mahavira is sitting in the center at a high pedestal, high seat. And then all around there are different kind of people sitting, because Samavsaran is enacted or is created by gods, so that all kinds of living beings, gods, and from other places also, other planets also, the celestial beings can come and listen to the message of the enlightened master. But when he created this, then also the Mahavir would not speak. Then Indra, God's king, realized that some scholar is needed who can understand what Mahavir wants to say, and then he can interpret the Mahavir's message, Mahavir's sermon, into the layman's language, or in the language of the different categories of people who were sitting there. So God's king, that is Indra, he persuaded one greatest scholar, one Brahmin, whose name was Indrahuti, to come there. And then he came there, and as soon as he saw Mahavira, he, along with his 10 disciples, became the first followers of Mahavira. He understood that Mahavira is an enlightened master, and then he became first Gautam, and his 10 disciples also followed him. So there are 11 Gautam Gardhars. They are the interpreters of Mahavir's knowledge. Like if I speak in Hindi and people are not knowing, then there are some translators. So same way these 11 Gandhars, they were doing the same task. The Mahavir used to reveal knowledge in abstract terms that will not be understandable by the common man or by gods. So some intermediary like Gautam Gandhar was required who will understand that knowledge and who will speak to different people, different categories of people in different ways. Because in Samam Saran, all kinds of living beings, all kinds of even the animal kingdom, even the devas, gods are there, even celestial beings are there. So Mahavir's knowledge was being spread through the intermediary or interpretation of these Gautam Gandhars. Indrahuti and his 10 disciples, known as Gautamas, were first ones to follow Mahavir's path. For 30 years, he traveled widely and preached to the people all over the country, mostly in the Bihar area, then down also. And at that time, Bihar was very vast. Bihar included Bengal also, Odisha also, because at that time, the concept of these kind of states was not there. So he widely traveled during those times. The truths and knowledge attained by him was revealed, and at the age of 72 he attained nirvana. So this is the brief picture of his life which I try to explain so that we can get a little glimpse of how he started his journey and how he attained and how did it happen, all this. So we can deal it in a very detailed manner in one or two sessions in the subsequent if it is liked by the participants. Now, there are 10 fundamental teachings, 10 principles, which we can talk about. There are 5 principles which are metaphysical, and 5 principles, they are the code of virtues or code of conduct. By following that code of conduct, we can move towards enlightenment. So, metaphysical are Anekantvad, Syadwad, Jeev Ajiva, Karmaj, and Parasparop Graho Jivanam, interdependence of life. These are 5 metaphysical. We will deal with them one by one. And code of conduct, that is called Panch Mahavrat or Panch Anuvrat. Mahavrat is for the monks, the people, the munis or the persons who have renounced this world. For them, these following these principles is more rigorous. And then they are Panch Anuvrat. If you are a household, then those brats are little soft. So what are those code of conduct? They are also propagated by Buddha. Ahimsa, Satya, Aste means non-stealing, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. So these 5 are the code of conduct. Now today I am going to deal with first on the 5th, that is the Parasparop Graho Jivanam. And then I'll come to Jiva Ajiv and Karmaj. And tomorrow we will deal with Anekantvad, Syadwad, and 5 code of conduct. So now I am just skipping this Anekantvad, Syadwad. Now let us come to Parasparo Graho Jivanam, because it's a very great principle of Mahavira, so comprehensively elucidated and pronounced. He says Mahavira was of the view that all life forms, be it of grass, living insect, mineral kingdom, human beings, animal kingdom, all life is interdependent and it exists mutually for mutual benefit. Therefore, it has to be respected and revered for life is own sake. Usually what happens, today's environmentalists also are saying that all life is to be protected, the vegetation is to be protected, the rivers are to be protected, mineral kingdom is to be protected. But they are realizing this very lately. And then also they are saying it has to be for the purpose of mankind. For the protection of mankind, we need to protect all life. This is what they are saying. That means the purpose of today's environmental scientists is only to protect humankind, and for purpose of their protection, it is needed all life forms need to be protected. But the Mahavira's message was very clear. He says that all life needs to be protected for its own sake, for the sake of life. Because Mahavira pronounced the second principle, that is intrinsic independence of all substances. He says all these substances are independent also. All life forms or material substances are independent and they are mutually coexisting. So we have to, and they are interdependent. So he says Mahavira advocated the right of equality for all living forms of life. Mahavira goes to the extent of saying that even an insect has the same right to live as you have a human being. He says that in terms of molecules, in terms of the composition, the same material is, you are also made of the same material. Like even now science are saying some carbon dioxide, some nitrogen, some oxygen, some water, all this make us this material body. So Mahavira says in terms of making, the same substance makes an insect and the same substance makes you as a human being. It is only you are at a upper level. The journey of the soul starts from the mineral kingdom, then it comes to plant kingdom, vegetation kingdom, then it comes to the animal kingdom, and then it comes to the human kingdom. So you have no right to kill your predecessors. You have been evolving through mineral kingdom only. So you need to protect even mineral kingdom and life prevailing there. You have to protect the life prevailing in the plant and vegetation kingdom. You have to protect the entire animal kingdom, because as the Patisar also say, they all are our brothers and sisters. So Mahavir went into a very in-depth, and he says, even smallest organism has the equal right to live like human beings. For Mahavira, even an ant, even an invisible living being has the same right to live as you as a human being. Kindly understand, if we can comprehend this concept, this in-depth concept of ahimsa by Mahavir, all our problems can be solved, resolved, and we get immediately awakened, because once we understand and appreciate the value of life of each and every living being, we will never be in murcha. We will always be awake, because we have to protect life. Mahavir says, when you take breath, then also you have to be aware, because even while taking breath, many small, invisible life is at stake. They are at risk. When you eat, then also you have to be awake. When you move, then also you have to be awake, because otherwise less so many living insects or others maybe get killed. Even when you sit or when you stand up, then also, so every posture, every movement of body, every sustenance of body has to be mindfully done, so that there is a minimum, utmost minimum injury to any living beings. He says the human being is made of the same substance as smallest worm on the earth. We have told that if you see the making material, it is almost the same. So Mahavira says, why it is so that you feel that you are important and others are not important. Like see the human civilization. In human civilization, we at the human beings level also did not consider other human beings at par with us. Rich people always thought that only they have the right to live. White people felt that only the white people have the right to live, not the blacks. There was the slavery. There was the underprivileged. So many caste systems were there in India. Elsewhere also, women were not given the due rights. So even when we talk about the humankind, the human beings had not given the equal right to live even to their fellow human beings. But Mahavir at that time, 2600 years ago, talked of giving equal right to the smallest, tiny, most insect which is not visible to the naked eye. So if the people who can understand this ahimsa in depth, or the followers who understood it, immediately they will get awakened, because they have to deal with their life in a very, very mindful manner. Nature does not differentiate. The Mahavir said that nature does not differentiate. Difference lies in their potentiality. Mahavir says that in terms of making, there is no difference, but of course, human beings are at a much more evolved stage. So their potentiality to attain nirvana or to make their own evolution is much more, and an insect or maybe a living being which is having limited potential will take many more words to come at that stage. There is nothing so small as incapable of producing great results. That's a great saying Mahavira said. Don't consider anybody so little that it cannot produce any results. It cannot create any consequences to you. Life is interdependent. It is human ignorance to see no greatness in little beings. Humans are so ignorant. They think that only they are great. Nobody else, no other living being has any relevance. They can slaughter the animals, because at that time, when Mahavir was born, and during that time, there was so much of killing of animals, sacrifices, rituals. People were meat eating. They were doing yajnas, and they were sacrificing the animals. And there was all out slaughter of animals, merciless dealing with the other human beings. There were slavery also. So he says, it is human ignorance to see no greatness in the little beings. Nature forgives you 1,000 times, but if its patience is exhausted, no human power can control the adverse consequences. Now, this is a very great saying of Mahavira, which is very much demonstrated in the COVID time. He says that nature can tolerate. Nature's forbearance is very deep, tremendous. Nature will continue to forbear or tolerate 1,000 times, maybe more than 1,000 times. But once its forbearance or its capacity to tolerate has exhausted, there will be a very bad consequences. I think the COVID, coronavirus, it is a very, very little being. It is a whether living or non-living, we are not sure. It is not visible to our eye. Scientists have still been doing research and they are not finding any solution. So now Mahavir saying now is very much demonstrated that you should never commit a blunder, a mistake of considering any little living being as nothing. It also can create lot of problems, disaster. It can even create such a turbulence to the entire existence. Then we are pushed to think where we have gone wrong. So this is presently what is happening in COVID time, that this particular virus, because we did not follow the law of ahimsa, we did not follow the law of love, mutual coexistence, respecting life in totality, that it is happening. And still the mankind is not able to understand. Uh, people slaughtered the animals mercilessly. They were meat eaters. They were doing a lot of research. They were using a lot of violent means, causing injuries day in and day night, and doing all kinds of damages to the animal kingdom and the other vegetation also. So now it is very much demonstrated that what Mahavir said was the ultimate truth, that we have to understand that we all are interdependent so far as life is concerned, and life has to be protected for life's own sake, not for the sake of humankind. Then Mahavira said, Earth also has life. Like Earth as a planet also has its tremendous life, and its upper soil. Now scientists have proved that the upper layer of soil is so full of life. It is a have massive microorganic substances, and they need to be preserved. Now, when we are moving towards organic agriculture, that thing is being demonstrated, because when we use fertilizers, chemicals, there is so much of killing, so much of hinsa. So that is the sermon Mahavira propagated. Parasparo graho jivanam. Entire life exists, mutually coexists, and life has to be respected for sake of life only, not merely for the protection of mankind. Modern environmentalists are in agreement that we have to protect the life. We have to, if we have to avoid pollution, we have to clean the rivers, we have not to cut the forest, but their focus is just for the protection of humankind. But in the spirituality, Mahavira says no, it is for protecting the life in totality, that we must always pursue towards protecting the life, respecting the life. So that was the very fundamental principle of Mahavira's teaching, and it is so much relevant for the prevailing situation of corona that we have to understand it so deep. We must try to cultivate this in our life, and we must protect ourselves, and we must equally respect and protect the other beings, maybe very little, and we must minimize our injury in our day-to-day activities, essential activities of be it eating, be it walking, be it breathing, be it drinking water. Everywhere we have to observe this, and if we observe, we become mindful in our day-to-day activities, we get awakened also. Mindfulness is one of the way of modern meditation, which people are now teaching. So if you live mindfully, then also you become awakened. So Mahavira has in so clear terms said that when you exist, you have to live with total awakening, so that you can protect and you can respect life in its totality. So that was all about the one teaching of Mahavira, Parasparo Graho Jivanam. Now I switch to the next teaching, that is the seven tattvas. The Mahavira talked about the seven tattvas. One is this Jiva. There are the seven, seven primary substances which Mahavir talked about. Mahavir talked about that entire basic primary substances can be only divided into seven. One is Jiva, that is soul, that is consciousness, that is Atma. Then there is Ajiva. Ajiva is non-living substance, that is Karma. Karma is also Ajiva. And then Ashrab, that is the influx of karmas. Bandh, that is bondage of karma. Sambara, stoppage of new karma. Nijra, extinction of accumulated karmas. And moksha, liberation from all karmas. So if you see these seven tattvas, they all, the Mahavira divided, like there are Panch Bhutaj. Here from the spiritual angle, the Mahavir divided everything, all substances, into Jiva and Ajiva first. So Jiva is the soul, consciousness. Ajiva is the non-living substances. And in non-living substances, karma is also non-living substance. Till now, apart from Mahavira, nobody ever talked that karma is also a substance. That is a new revelation which Mahavir's teachings say. They say karma is also a very tiny molecule. It is also in terms of molecule, or you can think that it is also a kind of dust particles. So karma is also taken as a non-living substance that we are going to deal in a great detail now, because we are on the theory of karma. And then the another five, Ashrava, that talks ki when these particles, molecules of karma, they are called karma skand, karma particle. They start coming and getting attached to our soul. That is called, the process is called ashrava. That there are these molecules present, 23 types of molecules, particles are present, prevailing in the universe. And when there is some vibration in the soul because of your thinking, your speaking, and your actions, there is some vibration. Then those karmas, those particles get attached to the soul. And the soul's infinite vision, soul's real qualities get obscured. That is the theory in the Mahavir highlighted in the theory of karma. So that I am going to deal in detail in the subsequent discussions. So here, karma is a non-living substance and soul is a living substance. Only jiva is the soul only, and soul does not only exist in the human being, it is in all living beings. There is a soul, that is consciousness, but that soul is not in a pure form. Soul is always obscured because so many karma particles, that is called karmic matter, is attached with the soul. So ashrava is influx of karma. Bandh, when the karmas come towards soul, they get attached. That is called karma bandh. Means the particles have come and they have been attached with the soul. So it is called karma bandh. Then stoppage of new karma. Now when we practice some kind of spiritual practices or maybe meditation or contemplation that we will deal in the later part, then first thing we have to do, what we need to do, we must just shut down our windows. Means we should first stop the influx of new karmas. How do we do that? How Mahavir has told it, that we will explain or we will discuss. So first, Mahavira said, since there is an influx of karmas constantly coming and then becoming bondage, it is obscuring our atma, getting the so attached with soul. Therefore, first we need to do sambara. That is, we should close our windows so that influx of new karmas get arrested. It does not come. And then we have to do nirjara. Nirjara is that whatever past karmas, whatever accumulated karmas, they have come and they are attached with soul, because we are in this state of karmas attached with our soul since beginning, since it is a beginningless, anadi. It is, we do not know, in finite lifetimes this process is going. So we have to work through sambara, stopping the new karmas coming and getting attached to us, and then we should try for extinction of accumulated karmas. And whenever all karmas which are attached to our soul, they are extinct, they become burnt out, then our true form of our soul, that gets liberated. That is called moksha. So basically, if you see the entire process of liberation as per Mahavir's teaching is just to deal with your karmas. Soul attached or surrounded with karmic matter or engulfed by karmic matter gets obscured in its of its purity. There are fundamental traits of soul. If soul in the pure form, it has infinite knowledge, infinite intuitive vision, that is called. It has infinite bliss, and it has infinite power, like the Mahavir soul now. He was able to see, Mahavira was able to see everything in this universe with his infinite eyes. It is said that once you become kevali, that is, you have keval gyan, your eyes become infinite. Entire reality is known to you, and you may, somebody, Gautam Gardhan may not be able to explain it in words, but the Mahavir knew everything. That is why what Mahavira has preached and what Mahavira has told about the hidden reality, now science is proving. At that time, nobody knew that the water we are drinking, there are so many small kind of living beings. Now the science has proved, when you develop the microscope array, there are so many living beings. Similarly, in the soil, there were so much living beings. Mahavira talked about that science is proving now. The plant and vegetation is having living essence, that is proved now. But Mahavira spoke at that time. Mahavira says even fire, whenever you burn fire, then also there are so many living beings. Then Mahavira talked about that you should eat before sunset. The only purpose is, as soon as there is a sunset, lot of insects, lot of invisible living beings come. But when there is a sunshine, they do not arise, they are not there. So if you don't want to kill them, it is better, whatever are essential activities of movement, of eating, of drinking, everything should be before sunset, because in the sunlight they are not born. But as soon as there is sunset, so many living beings, they are taking birth and then they will die, and you should not become an instrument of their killing, of injury to them. That was the message. So many things which Mahavira saw in his vision, they are being proved by the scientific research, but not in totality. Now we go one by one. Next. Now there are division of karmas. There is a pap karma and punya karma. Pap karma are the evil acts which we do with the feelings of anger, ill will, selfishness. So this is called Ashubh karma also. Before I'll come to the next stage, then I'll explain. Punya karmas are those karmas which are meritorious acts with positive feelings. When we have a feelings of love, feelings of togetherness, because after all karmas, they arise, their root is in our mind. That is with our emotions, feelings, whatever we think, whatever we feel, whatever is our mood, that is the basic root of karma is there. Then maybe many times we speak and then we act also. So only it is not the question of actions, physical actions, it is at the mental level. Mental level itself, the karma is done. If I have some bitterness towards anybody, that is my karma. I have already done an evil act. If I think of killing somebody, even if I am not killed, the karma is done as per Jain philosophy. As per Mahavira teaching, you have already done it. If I think ill of somebody, that act is done, even if I do not pursue it further. So, punya, if I think of togetherness, love, I send positive vibrations, my Shubh karma is done even by thinking, because thinking is the root. Thought, feeling, emotions, mood, they are the basic root of karmas. Then there are two other distinctions, Drabya karma and Bhav karma. First we come on Bhav karma, that is our psychic activities I am talking about feelings, emotions, and passions. This Mahavira told they are the bhav karma. And Drabya karma is a particular type of matter molecule that is called karma skandha. So these two karmas are known as cause and effect. How Mahavira said that once you start having some ill feeling, some bitterness, some anger, some deceit, some ego, some greed. Four are the main causes of delusion, which they have said, which are negative feelings, are controlled or they are monitored or they are the source are these four: anger, ego, deceit, and greed. So if these arise in our mind, then there is a vibration. There is a vibration in our system, our consciousness, and then because of that vibration, Drabya karma, that is a matter molecule, that is karma skandha, it comes and it gets attached to our soul. So it obscures. There is a lot of attachment already. And if I think bad for somebody, I wish to do some injury to somebody, I think, I speak, or I do in actions, then more karmas, that is the karma molecules, they come and they get attached to the soul. So they are very, very small particles. The Mahavir has explained in a needle, the tip of needle is so small. And the scriptures say that in that space, millions, millions of millions, those particles, karma particles, can be available. So they are very, very tiny. It cannot be seen. It can be seen only by a eye of Mahavira who has infinite chakshu, Anant chakshu. Mahavira is known as having Ananta chakshu, infinite eyes. So only he could see that there is a karma molecule also. No other system talks about this molecule. Buddha knew it, but Buddha was more on practical aspect. You will see that Buddha did not speak much about the metaphysical issues. Buddha remained silent because Buddha knew if we talk too much of the metaphysics, then people only talk about metaphysics and they will not do the real work on themselves. But Mahavira did talk about the metaphysics. Therefore, Buddha just talked about the karma, how they are affecting you. But what is the contents of karma? What is the metaphysics behind karma? That was not so explained in Buddhism. Buddhism only talk about your feelings, your emotions, how they are bad for you, how they defile your mind. That is the effect of karma. Buddha is talking more about. Mahavira went into the root to explain that karma is a very, very tiny particles of matter that is called karma skandha or karma vargana, that is drabya karma. They get attached, and they get attached to your soul because of your bhav karma. Bhav karma is your feelings, your emotions, negatives, or maybe positive, both ways. Because even if I am having some kind of attachment, then also that will be formed. Because in order to ensure that there is no karmic matter come to you, you have to observe total dispassion, total equanimity. That is why in the Anapanasati meditation, and then there is a Vipassana also, in which they say all the vibrations of body, whether they are good or they are bad, they are pleasant or unpleasant, you have to see them with equanimity and they will pass. So, bhav karma and drabya karma. So, what you have to do if you want to work on drabya karma, you have to really work on your bhav karma. That is, you have to observe your feelings, your mood, your emotions, your passions. First of all, they should not be negative, and then they should also not be towards positivity. Ultimately, that we will come. How we have to slowly, we have to transmute our karmas. These two karmas, that is the Drabya karma and Bhav karmas, they are known as cause and effect. And then out of these Bhav karmas, there are of two categories. One is Ghati karma, which obscure the attributes of soul. And then there are Aghati karmas. There are 8 types of Bhav karmas which Mahavir has explained. So Ghati karmas are those karmas who obscure the nature of the soul, attributes of the soul. What are the attributes of the soul? It has infinite knowledge. It has infinite vision. It has infinite character and infinite power. And infinite character also includes infinite bliss. So if we purify our soul, every soul has the potential to become pure. That is called enlightenment or total awakening at the level where Buddha attained or Mahavira attained and so many other masters who followed them have attained. So Ghati karmas are 4, and these 4 Ghati karmas, they are obscuring the attributes of soul like infinite knowledge. There is one karma that is called Gyan Avarniya because they are the Sanskrit name, which obscures your Gyan. That is called Gyan Avarniya karma. That is one Ghati karma. Then infinite vision. That is called Darshan Avarniya karma, which obscures your vision, infinite power of your soul vision. Then Mohaniya karma. Mohaniya karma creates delusion, and therefore the soul is not aware of its infinite bliss or infinite character. And then there is a Antaraya karma that affects the infinite power or infinite virya or ananta virya of soul that gets affected. Then there are 4 Aghati karma. So Ghati karma, these are 4 Bhav karmas which you have to deal with. They have to be totally extinguished. The moment Jnana Varniya karma gets cleaned, you will get the infinite knowledge. That is in the pure form of soul. Then as soon as Darshana Varniya karma gets totally extinguished, there will be infinite vision. As soon as Mohaniya karma gets extinguished, your soul will have infinite bliss and infinite character. And as soon as Antaraya karma gets extinguished, you will have infinite power. So all these 4 traits, in fact there are 8 traits, but 4 traits, these are in the pure form of soul, and these are being obscured by 4 Ghati karma. Ghati karma means who obscuring, and 4 are Aghati karma, not obscuring the attributes of soul. They are Ayu. Mahavira said that Ayu is such which is fixed. Every person, every living being who comes in this particular birth, his Ayu or age is predetermined. Nobody can change it. So therefore, that is Aghati karma, means the Bhav karma will not affect that Ayu. Nam is related to the kind of physique you have, physical structure you have, kind of hair you have, kind of eyes you have, kind of family you have, kind of your mental structure is there, biological structure is there, even social setup is there. Everything comes in this particular bhav, this Nam, means whatever we have done in the past. Mahavira says that sum total of your past karmas in the infinite earlier lives, they have resulted into your present status, be it your mental position today, your psychological psychic mind, be your social status, be your economic status, be your body structure, whatever. That is the effect of your karmas of Nam and Gotra. Gotra says of whether you are in the high class or you are in the low class. That is called Gotra. So Gotra and Nam together talk about your physical structure, your characteristics of body, your mind state, your biological things. DNA also comes into that. So that is there. And Vedniya Karmas. Vedniya Karmas is deals with your agony, your miseries, your suffering. They may be at a mental level or a physical level. So these are also effect. They are also the effect of your bhav karmas. So this way, bhav karmas are 8 bhav karmas are the most important. 4 are ghati karmas, which obscure the qualities of the pure soul, and we have to work on them so that they become extinguished. Mahavira did it, Gautam Buddha did it, and then they existed in the pure soul form. And aghati karmas are dealing with Ayu, Nam, Gotra, and Vedniya karmas. But you have to work on them also so that equanimity is established. But as soon as 4 ghati karmas get extinguished, the person becomes enlightened. He attains Kevalya Gyan. Because Ayu karma will still remain. Like Mahavira attained Nirvan Keval Gyan at the age of 42, and for 30 years he traveled. So because Ayu karma was still there, at the 72 he left his body. So it was all because of Ayu karma. And apart from Ayu karma, his Nam, Gotra, etc., it also continued his physical structure, his so many other things together, DNA, so biological system. So they all come in Nam, Gotra, and Vedniya karma. Of course, Vedniya karma you have to work, because the miseries and the sufferings, agonies, all those kinds of feelings which you have, that you have to work upon. So that is all about the 8 karmas, bhav karmas. So we have pap karma, we have punya karma, we have dravya karma and bhav karma. They are the different divisions of karmas. Of course, there are more divisions, but I am just giving this all in a very small shape to begin with. And in the later lectures, sometime subsequently, we can be more elaborate on this. So then the next slide, evolution of karma. All karmas, bondage, defile qualities of soul, hence liberation requires freedom, extinction from all attached karmas. That I have already talked about. In the initial stage, one has to switch over to punya karma, that is shubh karma, so as to get positive atmosphere for self-evolution, like feelings of satisfaction, reward, and fulfillment. This is what is preached, that suppose we are into pap karmas, so we have done in past lives pap karmas. So what we will have? We will have total depression, disappointment, miseries in our life. And we want to come out of that. The process would be, we start switching over to punya karma. As soon as we start doing shubh karma, switch over from pap karma to punya karma, it will start impacting our life in a positive manner. That we will again highlight this. So they say the ladder towards enlightenment is from pap karma to punya karma, from ashubh karma to shubh karma, so that whenever I do the punya karma, I have a sense of satisfaction, I have a sense of compassion, I have a feeling of love, I have a better vibrations. At least they are not any they are not They are good vibrations, positive vibrations. And then one has to move towards total detachment and dispassion. This way, no punya karma will create new bondage and all the attached karmas will get extinguished. So the process is, if you want to extinguish your karma, first try to switch over from pap karma to punya karma. And when enough punya karmas would be created, then you will get a circumstance or situation where you can come out, you can uproot all your karmas and you can maintain a life of equanimity, samta, and total neutrality, so that no karmas, shubh or ashubh, punya or pap are created. And by, your all attached karmas get extinguished. Then there are these fourfold actions due to punya, pap, karma. One is called punyanubandhi punya. Here I am in a situation where there is a effect of past punya karmas, and out of those situations I am creating new punya karmas. Like today when we are sitting, I am in a good family, I am having good wealth, I am having good physique, good health. This is all on account of result of my punya karmas of past life, shubh karmas of past life, that I am in this position. Now out of this I have a choice. I can go down, I can create pap karmas, or I can do punya karmas. So minimum thing which is expected of me, or which I should do, at least we should get engaged, I should get engaged in punya karma, so that the punya karma, because of punya karma, I am in a situation and I at least continue the chain of punya karmas. So that is called punyanubandhi punya. Another is papanubandhi punya. I am in the present situation or circumstance due to the shubh karmas of past, punya karmas of past, but now I misuse my position, I do the evil acts, I do the ashubh karma. So then I will create bondage of bad karmas, and that will take down. Like in the Mahavir case also, there is a story that Mahavira was the grandson of first Tirthankara, that is the Adinath, Rishabhnath of Jain tradition. He was son of Mahavira in the birth as Marichi. He was known as Marichi. He was the son of Bharat, Chakravarti Bharat, who was son of Rishabdev. And Rishabdev, when he got enlightenment, somebody asked him that who will be the next Tirthankara. So Rishabdev said that there will be 24 Tirthankaras, 23 more following me. So somebody asked the question whether some Tirthankar is present here. So then Rishabdev told, yes, Marichi, that is the grandson or the son of Bharat, he would be the last Tirthankara, 24th Tirthankara. Marichi, as soon as he listened to it, he became very arrogant and he started misusing, and he started doing some evil actions. And there are millions and millions of years he had to take birth as animal, as insects. There is so many stories because there are lakhs of words and words. And then he took the ultimately he became Mahavira. Because before Mahavira, if we take those stories, they will be contained in many chapters, or many lectures will be needed for that. So even Mahavira, in one's lifetime, he was a lion, and then he saw some saints, two Jain saints. So that lion was so ferocious, and two saints came and they are standing and they are seeing in the eyes of lion. So this lion in that birth became very shocked, because he has never seen anybody standing before him. So he was totally terrified. What kind of these two beings, to these monks, they are not afraid. And it transformed him. And then from that the birth of tiger or lion, he took some birth of human beings and then he became Mahavira. That is a long story. So like this, the people, even the great people, enlightened masters, they have to travel into different incarnations, maybe human beings or the animals or maybe even the lower beings. That is the total history of all these Tirthankaraj. So Papanubandhi Punya, then we call Punyanubandhi Pap. Sometimes you are doing the Pap karmas, that is the Ashubh karmas, but you have done and you are in a very miserable condition, but you do good karmas. So it becomes Punyanubandhi Pap. And then Papanubandhi Pap. You are in the present circumstance due to a bad karma effect. And then you again enter into the same chain. That is called Anubandha, Anantanubandh. Anantanubandh. That called Anantanubandh. So now, through efforts, one can change bondage of karma. Because today I'll be just concluding. We have enough. We have spent enough of time. That destined results of karma is altered, transformed, and eliminated. The soul is responsible for its karmas, and nobody can bail out the soul by taking over the share of somebody else's karma. By self efforts alone, the soul can become supreme. The karma philosophy enforces moral and ethical conduct. Whatever your present status, mental, physical, emotional, psychic, biological, social, your own karmas are responsible. Even your physical structure, Mahavira says, Jainism says, even how many hairs do you have, what kind of features you have, how much capacity of your intellect is there. Everything is created or comes out of your past karmas. Karma's law is automatic. There is no discount. You have to bear the fruits of karma. Be watchful at the time of fruition. Now they say karma bandh and karma uday. Karma bandh is when, suppose I am creating a ill will to somebody. This is karma bandh. But karma uday, fruition will take place maybe immediate, or it may be after 2 years, or maybe in the next lifetime, or maybe after hundreds of lifetime. So we have to watch at the time of fruition of the karma. Like if I getting angry, somebody is causing me to get anger, I have to watch, because he is only a nimitt, he is only a apparent reason, but I have not to blame him. I have to watch myself, maintain equanimity, no reactive emotions, feelings to avoid fresh bondage. Otherwise I'll create fresh bondage. Don't blame anyone. Others are merely nimitta, apparent causes. All happenings in your life, howsoever small, due to your karmas. Meditation, the best method to cleanse karmic matter. Story of meditator monk. I have not narrated any story. So it's a story which is given in the Jain scripture, that there was a man who was seriously ill. So he goes to a doctor, to a Ved at that time, and he says, Ved says there is some imbalance in your kapha and pith, and he gives some medicines. The man very religiously practices that, but of no avail. Then he goes to some astrologer. Astrologer says, yes, there is some deficiencies in your stars, and he also tells him some tricks, do some anushthan, some rituals. That man does that rituals, then nothing happens, no improvement. Then he goes to a tantric, a magician, and that magician says, yes, there is some shortfalls, some problems, and I tell you these kinds of mantras, etc. You chant, and then you take care. Then you take care. He does that, and then also it doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, then he goes to the forest and in the forest, he meets a monk who is meditating. He just stands there, and after standing, he just waits that the monk opens his eyes, and the monk opens his eyes, and this human being, this fellow who is ailing, who is suffering from some disease, he tells him his problem. I went to a doctor, of no use. I went to a astrologer, again of no use. I went to a tantric, again of no use. Now you help me. He says the only, this is all effect of your karmas, and only cure, only remedy is meditation. So be a meditator, do your meditation. Whichever platform TSSM is doing, that the remedy and cure for all maladies, all ills is meditation, nothing else. So you have to observe in your life acceptance. You have to accept things as they are. It's not that because they are the results of our past karmas only, we have not to blame anybody. Non-judgmental. We cannot judge any situation, any human being, or any event. Because judgmental creates unnecessary turbulence in our mind, and that will create fresh bhav karmas, which will take fruition, and we get affected by that. Then we have not to make any complaint and no expectation. I could have dealt with in detail. Maybe tomorrow I deal with them. I am a little fast. And we have to forgive. We have to observe forgiveness 24 hours, because we are making so much injury to life. So in the time we go to bed, we have to seek forgiveness from all these small insects also, that we have killed so much. And we have also to seek with human beings wherever we have expressed some bitterness in our heart. So keep on seeking forgiveness and giving, keep on giving forgiveness and gratitude to the existence that we are at such a level. Thank you so much. I think I am being able to do some justice to the teachings of Mahavira so far as karma theory is concerned and Paraspro Graho Jivana. Thank you.